Welcome back to Rain Soothing for 7 channel. Let's start our opening, just like we always do. Put on your headset and feel the sensation. This is the place where no sound exists, except the rain. No pressure, just breath and gentle silence. Here, every drop of rain is more than just a sound. It's a soft embrace for your tired soul. You don't have to do anything, just listen. Close your eyes if you want to, and let the sound of the rain guide you back home to yourself. This is rain. This is your time to be calm. In the midst of a lush, green forest, you sit with your back against a large tree. Soft sunlight filters through the gaps in the leaves, casting gentle patterns of light all around you. Headphones rest in your ears, letting you drift into calming music. The peace on your face reflects the serenity only solitude can bring. You close your eyes, savoring every passing moment. The sounds of nature around you, the whispering wind, rustling leaves, and singing birds create a peaceful atmosphere that surrounds you. A gentle breeze plays with your hair, as if nature itself shares in your calm. You feel far away from the noise of the world. No traffic, no city sounds, just you, the tree, and the voice of nature filling the space. For a moment, the world feels perfect, as if time itself has paused. In the distance, you hear the soft trickle of water from a small stream. The rain has just passed, leaving droplets still falling from the branches to the earth. Those sounds blend gently with the music in your ears, forming a perfect harmony. You take a deep breath, drawing in the scent of fresh, damp earth. The warmth of the sun on your skin, paired with a cool breeze, brings a balance that feels completely at peace. A soft smile crosses your lips as if you found the perfect place to simply be. Beneath that great tree, you remain still, wrapped in a moment of boundless calm, as though there is no place more beautiful than this here, in the embrace of pure and peaceful nature. You slowly open your eyes. The sky has started to change, pale blue fading into soft gold. Dusk arrives quietly, wrapping the forest in a warm and gentle glow. A small bird lands on a branch above you, chirping softly as if saying hello. You turn your head slowly, taking in your surroundings. Dew still clings to the tips of leaves, sparkling in the last light of the day. You reach for the water bottle in your bag, taking a slow sip. Every movement feels unhurried, as if time itself has truly slowed down. And somehow, you don't feel like going home. Not yet, not while the world is this calm. In the distance, at the edge of the forest, you spot a narrow path, one you've never walked before. The rain has left it damp and a little slippery, but something inside you, a quiet curiosity, or perhaps a longing, draws you toward it. You rise slowly, brushing the dirt from your pants, then gaze down the path. Your steps are light, but your heart is full. You don't know where this path leads, but you know one thing. You're ready to follow it, carrying the echo of the rain. Now a soft whisper behind you. The rain now falls deeper, not heavy, not light. Like a careful piano piece, each drop lands with intent, carrying a message from sky to soil. You sit in stillness, listening. No words can describe the calm that wraps the room. Only the old man's violin and the rhythm of the rain echo gently, like the long-lost friends finally reunited. Long ago, he says softly, I used to sit here, waiting for someone. They said they'd return when the rain came again. You don't ask who. You don't need to, because you know we all carry memories tucked behind the curtain of the rain. The old man rises slowly, then opens the window. Damp air rushes in, laced with the scent of earth freshly kissed by the sky. Leaves tremble outside, and a flicker of lightning briefly paints the darkened clouds with silver light. Rain never comes for nothing, he says. It comes to remind us that pain can dissolve, that even loneliness has a voice, and that we don't always need to explain what we feel. You look up, letting the first drop touch your skin, warm and cold all at once. And in that silence, you begin to understand that sometimes what you seek isn't an answer, but space to feel. And that night, the rain gave it to you. The rain now is more than just sound. It is a song, a melody without words, touching your heart, echoing deep within the most hidden corners of your soul. Each drop that falls is a buried hope, each drop a prayer unsaid. The old man sits once more in his chair, cradling his violin with care, as if he knows tonight is not only to listen to the rain, but to feel it in every note that flows from his weathered fingers. You see, he says softly, rain reminds us of everything that's gone, but also of what is to come. It is the messenger between the past and the future, carrying us into the unsaid moments. You close your eyes, letting his words flow, merging with the sound of the rain that grows louder, more insistent. There is no need for further conversation, because every raindrop is a conversation between souls that never ends. From outside, the trickling of water flowing from the little stream reaches your ears. The rain soaks the earth, washing over everything, as if erasing the marks of time that have passed. Everything that once felt heavy now seems to flow away, carried by the rain, leaving behind only what can be. Look at the rain. The old man continues, it never judges. It comes without question, without reason, like true love. It arrives, it leaves, but it never fully departs. Outside, the rain intensifies, lightning flickers, but it only deepens the atmosphere, making it more alive, more profound. You sit still, realizing that under this dark, rain-filled sky, there is an extraordinary calm. And that night, you learn that rain is not just about the water falling from the sky. Rain is about letting go, about finding peace in the noise of the world. Rain is nature's embrace that brings back what was lost, bringing home the forgotten feelings. The clock on the cabin wall ticks softly, but you don't notice it. Time doesn't move here the way it does outside. It dissolves with the rain, unraveled in the falling drops from the sky. The old man stops playing. He sets the violin gently on a soft cloth, as if he's just laid down a heavy memory with great care. He looks at you for a moment, then smiles. You may stay as long as the rain hasn't stopped, he says. You reply with only a small nod. Inside you, something begins to soften, not because of his words, but because the rain speaks the things you've never dared to say out loud. Outside, the trees sway gently with the wind. Wet branches bow low, as if they to know this night is not meant for hurry. Everything seems to lean into the quiet beauty of now. And there you are, sitting in the warmth of stillness, not searching for answers, not waiting for miracles, just sitting, letting the world speak through the rain in your own heartbeat. In that echo, you understand that sometimes peace doesn't come from the absence of sound, but from the presence of the right one. And that night, the rain spoke you into being. And finally, as the night slowly yields to dawn, the rain begins to fade. The last drops fall gently, as if reluctant to part with the earth. The air grows clearer, lighter like a world reborn from silence and water. You stand at the doorway of the cabin, gazing at the horizon now softly blooming with light. Leaves glisten with what remains of the rain, and dew clings to the tips of grass like words left unspoken. The old man stands behind you, silent. No farewell is needed, for you both know this was never about beginnings or endings. It was only ever about the moment, and in that moment, you understand completely. Rain is a pause. It comes not to erase, but to remind. It is poetry written by the sky for weary hearts. It never asks us to understand, only to feel. It doesn't question, it touches. And in that touch, we remember who we truly are. Because in the end, rain is not just water. Rain is space to be still, to heal, to become.